I assume everybody's here.
Yep, I think we're ready.
Yep.
Okay, you are live.
All right. I am Daniel Drake, Chair of the Nantucket Airport Commission. I call the January 12th, 2021 Airport Commission meeting to order. We're using Zoom webinar for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed on the airport's website by clicking through the homepage notice about the draft environmental report to find the link. Or the information will be on the screen, this screen, during my introductory remarks. People registering to be an attendee must use their full names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode, and they can click the raise the hand button if they choose to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order in which they were raised. If you do not have an audio capable device, you can use a call-in number. We will not be using the YouTube chat function. All questions should be directed to participants through the chair. As a preliminary matter, allow me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Arthur Gasparo.
Here.
Jeanette Topham. Jeanette Topham. Is Jeanette on?
Yes, here.
Thank you.
It says mute and then it says unmute.
Ms. Planzer has just informed us that she is held up in an appointment, and Mr. Buscarin will join the meeting about 4:30. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Airport Manager Rafter.
Here.
Assistant Manager Noah Carberg.
Here.
Katie Perales. Katie Perales.
Here,
Lily Sylvia.
she's not here.
She's not here. Okay. Anticipated speakers on the agenda. As I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Richard Doucette from the New England region of the Federal Aviation Administration.
Here.
Alex Strisky, Environmental Analyst for MEPA, the Mass Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
Here.
From McFarland Johnson, Inc., Nantucket Airport's Principal Engineering Environmental Consultant. Brian Smith, Regional Director of Aviation.
Here.
Jed Murrow, Environmental Project Manager. Where's our boy? Can't hear you, Brian.
He was having some audio problems a minute ago.
All right, well,
He is on the call.
okay. Well,
But
he needs to solve those problems.
Yes, he does.
Georgie Nugent is an Environmental Project Manager for McFarland Johnson.
Here.
And from another environmental and engineering consulting firm that works with the airport, known as VHB, Meredith Avery, Director of Natural Resources.
Didn't hear you, Meredith.
Here.
Thank you. Donnie Goris Kolb, Planner.
Here.
And Jason Ross, Air and Noise Specialist.
Here.
Good evening. This meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport. Oh, but did I miss anybody as I went
Jed,
through?
Jed is back.
I'm back.
Jed Morero from McFarland Johnson. Good to have you with us, Jed.
Thanks. Coming and going.
Kind of important.
This meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth caused by the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of this meeting. For this meeting, the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is convening by video conference via the Zoom webinar app and broadcasting on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. We will also allow public participation using the Zoom webinar. Sorry. There will be two opportunities for public comment. One will be at the end of the draft environmental impact report portion of the meeting for matters related only to that topic. The second will be after the airport manager's report towards the end of the meeting for comments on matters other than the draft environmental report. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by video and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Also, supporting meeting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. The ground rules for this meeting are designed to provide for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. I or the preceding speaker will introduce each speaker. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold, until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right, moving on to our public meeting on the draft environmental impact report and environmental assessment for the airport. We'll go on. We are here to present the draft environmental impact report and environmental assessment required by the Aviation Administration to the public, and take comments and answer questions you may have. The environmental impact report is an evaluation required by the state of Massachusetts as per the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. And the environmental assessment is a required evaluation by the Federal Aviation Administration as per the National Environmental Policy Act. The complete document, which is a combined evaluation, is available on the airport's website, nantucket-ma.gov. This meeting is being held specifically to provide the public an opportunity to ask questions about the project and submit comments. The public comment period will end on January 29th. The email address for submitting comments is on the airport website, and we'll be providing it at the end of this presentation also. You can also ask questions by contacting Assistant Airport Manager Noah Carberg, and we will provide his contact information as well. Excuse me. We will then talk briefly about how we got to this point, the purpose of the meeting, and the next step for these projects. Then we will describe the individual projects that are proposed, then take comments and answer questions. Are you going to the next slide, please? Slide 4.
Georgie, next slide.
Isn't technology wonderful?
There we go.
The planning effort at the Nantucket Airport have been a long-term process and a continuing process, and have evolved and adapted as our needs have evolved. The current planning process began with our airport master plan. The master plan includes an inventory and evaluation of the airport's infrastructure, environmental resources and constraints, past and projected future aircraft and passenger traffic, and needs for future infrastructure and facilities. Updating a master plan typically takes a few years and involves public consultation and input. In Nantucket's case, the master plan was last updated in 2015. And from 2012 to 2015, there were meetings with a neighborhood group, an open house, a 15-person working group, a master plan website, and additional flyers and other materials and publicity. Our master plan vetted a wide variety of alternatives for improving infrastructure and meeting the airport's needs, and was published in 2015. On an annual basis, the airport takes the master plan recommendations and prepares a capital improvement plan. This is done in consultation with the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. The capital improvement plans defines which projects will be done when and how they will be funded. It is revised year to year as needs and funding capabilities evolve. Most of the projects proposed here are on the capital improvement plan. The airport can't just go out and build the projects, of course. It has to comply with laws and regulations. The next step in the process is to meet state and federal regulatory requirements, specifically the Massachusetts and National Environmental Policy Acts. Here to tell us about the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act is Alex Stritsky of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Mr. Stritsky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope everyone can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Just wanted to.
There's a little bit of an echo, but we can hear you.
Okay. So if you could go to the next slide. I'm just going to give a very brief overview of the MEPA process and where this project stands and what the next steps are. MEPA stands for Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. It's administered by the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And if you could just scroll through all of those, please. Thanks. A couple major points I wanted to make about the purpose of MEPA is that it is not a permitting process. However, it precedes state agency action, the state agency actions, including permits under certain conditions. So it is applicable to a project when there's a state agency action and when the project exceeds a certain regulatory threshold that's in our regulations, an environmental threshold that's in our regulations. So the purpose of MEPA is to ensure that projects disclose their environmental impacts, identify measures to minimize those impacts and mitigate any damage to environment that cannot be mitigated or avoided, or minimized or avoided. And it's an opportunity for the public to participate in the review of a project sort of before the permitting stage. Next slide, please. So again, that's summarizing some of the things I just said. In this case, the project requires two state agency actions. One is a permit from the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, and it will also require receive funding from Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And since the project's receiving funding from state agency, our scope of review is broad, relates to any environmental impacts. If only a permit was required and no funding, then it would be limited to pretty much to the scope of the permitting agency's review of the project. So those are state agency actions, and the applicable thresholds for the project were related to the amount of land alteration and impacts of rare species habitat. Okay, go ahead. MEPA is, there are two paths in MEPA. By far, most projects meet a lower threshold for review and are required to file an environmental notification form, or ENF, and that's it. Once the review of that document is completed, they've complied with MEPA and can pursue their state permits or state funding, whatever the case may be. However, larger projects, including this one, are required to also file environmental impact reports, typically a draft environmental impact report, or DEIR, and then a final impact report of FEIR. So that's the case with this project, as I mentioned. So our review started in December of 2019. The airport filed an expanded environmental notification form with a request for a phase 1 waiver. So typically, our review of the whole project has to be completed before any part of it can start construction. So a phase 1 waiver was requested so that the funding and permitting for Taxiway E could get underway before the MEPA review of the rest of the project was completed. In connection with the filing of the ENF, public meetings held at the airport in December 2019. And after a comment period, the certificate on the ENF was issued in about a year ago, and the phase 1 waiver was granted in February of last year. And that was, again, focused on allowing Taxiway E to proceed. So the certificate on the ENF included a scope for the draft EIR, and that essentially identified all the information and analyses that the airport was required to provide in that draft EIR. So we are now in the comment period for the DEIR. It ends on January 29th. And then a week later, on February 5th, another certificate will be issued on the draft EIR this time, and it will review the project, review public comments, review comments we receive from state agencies, and identify a scope for any additional information or analysis that should be provided in the final EIR. And so we're required by statute to issue the certificate a week after the comment period ends. And again, it's not an approval. In this case, it will include mostly a scope for the final EIR. The filing of the final EIR is up to the airport. There's no time scheduling or time limits as far as the MEPA process goes. But once it is filed, there'll be another 30-day review period, 30-day comment period, and then a certificate will be issued after that. Okay, next slide. So here's my contact information for submitting comments. The MEPA, you can email them directly to me or submit them via the MEPA public comments portal. And rather than give you the address for that public comments portal, I just recommend you Google it, and it should be easy to find. And if anyone has questions or comments after today, here's my phone number and email address again, and I'd be happy to answer any questions people have tonight or subsequent to tonight. So I just want to stress that while I will be participating in the meeting tonight and taking notes, the only formal way to submit comments to MEPA is through writing or email. So I encourage anyone who's interested in the project to do that. And the airport will be required to respond to all the comments received in the final EIR. Okay, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. Appreciate your joining us. Next, to tell us about the National Environmental Policy Act process is Richard Doucette of the Federal Aviation Administration. Mr. Doucette?
Good afternoon. The National Environmental Policy Act has been in effect since January of 1970. And just as MEPA applies to state agencies, NEPA applies to federal agencies. There are federal regulations issued by an agency in the White House called CEQ, the Council on Environmental Quality. And those regulations apply to all agencies. Every federal agency has its own internal guidance that guides how we apply NEPA to what we do at airports. And anybody who contacts me, I can give you links to the FAA environmental guidance. There are typically 2 triggers that can engage NEPA for an airport project. There are plenty of things that airports do day to day that are not, that just do not trigger NEPA. But the things they typically do are, number 1, federal funding. That's a federal action under NEPA. Or number 2, certain agency approvals, official approvals. And the standard approval that triggers a lot of NEPA actions is our approval of the airport layout plan. You might hear the phrase ALP, that's short for airport layout plan. Every public airport in the nation has an ALP, and that's a graphic representation of the existing facilities at the airport and what might happen in the future, the potential future condition. So in this case, we have changes proposed to the ALP and we have federal funding. So both triggers are met, and that's why we're following the NEPA process as well as the MEPA process. It's a combined document and a combined process. So all the comments that are received by MEPA, they'll go to the airport as well, and they'll come to my office as well. At the end of the environmental analysis and public comment period, the FAA will issue a decision. That decision takes one of 2 forms. Either will determine that the potential environmental impacts are so significant that we have to jump to the next level, which is to do an environmental impact statement, which is a longer, more detailed, more expensive process. We do not anticipate that will happen. What typically happens at the end of an environmental assessment is we issue a decision called a finding of no significant impact. We try to incorporate environmental mitigation into our projects so that we can issue that finding of no significant impact. It's not a finding of no impact, it's a finding of no significant impact. And our environmental guidance describes what's significant and what is less than significant, just as the MEPA regulations do. And that document would be issued at the end of the entire process. So that's the NEPA process in a nutshell. Thank you.
Dan, I think you're muted.
I know, I am, sorry. Thank you, Richard, appreciate that. Jed Murrow is now going to, of McFarland Johnson, the consulting engineering firm, is going to go through the various proposed projects. Jed, take it away.
Thank you. I assume you can hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Great. I've been having audio problems. I apologize in advance if it recurs. If it gets too bad, I might have to pass it off to Brian Smith, who can talk about the projects as well as I can. If my audio cuts out and you can't hear me, just wave or something, let me know. So the projects, there's 10 projects proposed. I'll just real quickly where they are, the airfield left to right here. On the far left along Nobadeer Beach is the relocate the perimeter road and fence. The main runway running horizontally is runway 624, proposing to rehabilitate that and relocate stub taxiways. Above that to the left is the South Apron expansion with a possible noise berm constructed. Below the runway, the diagonal runway, runway 1230 is proposed to be decommissioned, converted to taxiway C. In the terminal area, proposing to construct a new ground service equipment storage building and to replace airfield lighting home run cables. Also Taxiway G relocation to the right of the terminal building, and to the far right, on the upper right, proposed to construct crew quarters and to expand a marine storage facility or boatyard. Next slide, please. All right, first let's talk about runway 624 rehabilitation. The runway pavement was last improved in 2004. And the pavement condition is tested and determined regularly. Tests show it's in decline. It's approaching the limits of its useful life. When it's reconstructed, it will be designed to support the increasingly heavy aircraft that use the airport. Also, when designing runway projects, the FAA requires that they be brought up to current standards, including the runway profile, which is the elevation along the center line, the side slopes, something called fillets, which I'll show you in a moment, stub taxiway alignments, and stormwater management. FAA has already allowed exceptions to some of these requirements, which has substantially reduced the temporary impacts to rare species habitat from an original 27 acres to around 7 acres. There will be about 7.5 acres of temporary impact to priority habitat of rare species. And as you can see here, the green shading is priority habitat of rare species. It covers most of the airfield. At the top, you can see non-priority habitat. This figure shows the limits of work, the black line around the southern half of the runway. Yellow is where new pavement would be added in the form of, those are the fillets that are new geometry requirements that allow planes to turn properly. And at the very southern end of the runway, there's a green area that's pavement removal. Next slide. The northern half of the runway, some more fillet work, some more pavement removal work. At the top of the screen, you can see the green and yellow areas. The green is where stub taxiways would be removed, and the yellow is where they would be constructed. The FAA has determined that a direct line from the parking apron onto a runway is a bad idea, because pilots that are going to the taxiway might go right through to the runway, find themselves on the runway by mistake, and cause conflicts with other aircraft. So they like the taxiways to be offset. We're proposing to offset those two taxiways. You can see the northern part of the runway is not proposed for rehab or reconstruction. That's because it's in good shape. Next slide. Okay. A study was conducted in 2018 to determine how to bring runways 1230 and 1533 up to current FAA standards. Many alternatives were studied, including a new parallel taxiway, a partial parallel taxiway, and others. All involved extensive new construction costs and impacts. For these reasons, and also because the runway is infrequently used as a runway, the FAA made a determination that the runway would be decommissioned and converted to Taxiway C. Next slide. And this just shows you that runway / taxiway. The only physical change would be new pavement markings and possibly some lighting upgrades. Next slide. The airfield lighting home run cables run from the electrical vault under the terminal apron and out to the lighting systems on the airfield, and they're reaching the end of their serviceable life and need to be replaced. Very little impact, if any, with that project. Next. There's a proposal to construct a high-speed taxiway off of the runway for planes landing on runway 24. This is the busiest runway, and it would allow planes to exit the main runway more quickly. It would reduce taxiing time, less wait time for passengers, less fuel burn, and therefore less emissions and noise, and also less time on the runway, so that there's less chance of conflict conflicts between two aircraft using the runway. It would add about 1 acre of impervious surface in grassland that is priority habitat of rare species. Next slide. The airport is proposing to expand the South Apron, the main aircraft parking area. It would be expanded by a little over 1,000 feet, be about 250 feet wide, as you can see here. Next slide. Would cover about 7 acres. This is a critical safety issue for the airport. On busy summer weekends, there just isn't enough space to park all the aircraft. So sometimes they're parked on taxiways and runways, as you can see in this aerial photo. It's a major safety concern because an airplane might try to use a closed runway, and there'll be conflicts between aircraft there. Next slide. The lack of parking space means aircraft have to taxi or to be towed around the airfield, or even sometimes go off the airfield overnight. Creates extra air and noise emissions, and it's a frequent condition, this jockeying around of planes and moving around of planes on the airfield. Next. Less frequent, but also a concern, is parking on runways and taxiways. Has safety concerns, as we mentioned, also air and noise concerns. This happens up to 3 to 5 weekends per summer. Next slide. And the problem is not just more air traffic, and there is more air traffic than there was several years ago. Next. But it's also larger aircraft. The aircraft that are coming to the airport are getting larger and heavier. Next. Can we just send them away? Do we have to let them come to the airport? Well, no is a short answer. There are FAA grant assurances. These are the agreements you make when you take federal dollars to upgrade your airport or maintain the airport. It requires open access to the airport, and we can't turn people away. What about drop and go, which is sending aircraft to another airport overnight? It increases aircraft operations and the associated environmental impacts, and the effects are local as well as reverberating through the national airport system. Next. We worked closely with the FAA and other agencies to come up with the minimum amount of space needed to accommodate the aircraft. What we're proposing is a substantial reduction in pavement compared to what was proposed in the master plan, which is shown in green and would have been 1,500 feet by 400 feet roughly. Next slide.
I think we just lost Jed's audio. Can people hear me now? This is Brian Smith.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll let Jed get back on, and for the few minutes he's gone, I'll do some narration. As part of the South Apron, we did take a little look at noise impacts, potential noise impacts of the aircraft on the apron. And one idea that was looked at was creating an airport noise berm, basically a pile of dirt, which creates a break between the line of sight or the line of noise between the aircraft and the adjacent homes. This is something that's being considered by the Airport Commission. It's not part of the federal or state projects at this point. It's just something we're looking at. Next slide. It is a possible enhancement to reduce noise, about 15 feet high, vegetated. It could be vegetated consistent with the vegetated communities on and around the airport. As I said, it's totally dependent on local funding decisions when it can be constructed and if it can be constructed. There are competing environmental benefits to doing a noise berm, and they need to be thought about a little bit more before we proceed. It certainly reduces noise impacts, which is a positive, but there's quite a bit of endangered and protected species habitat that's impacted by constructing the berm. It does reduce the long-term vegetation management, and it is a preferred alternative, but it needs to be permitted and looked at as we move forward. Overall dimensions, a little under 1,000 feet long, about 100 feet wide and 15 feet high. Jed, are you back?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
no problem.
Thank you for jumping in.
So I'll talk about this one, then I'll let Jed have it back. This is a noise berm that was constructed about 30 years ago out at Pease International Trade Port in New Hampshire. So it blends in, it does vegetate nicely when it's there for some period of time. All yours, Jed.
Okay. Sorry about that, folks.
Welcome
Next
back.
slide. Thank you. Good to be back. Next slide, please. The next project would relocate Taxiway G. Because of the size of planes using the runway and taxiway, they're closer together than design guidelines would dictate. We're just shifting it 27 feet to the west with little net overall impact. Next slide. Also proposed is to relocate Perimeter Road and the adjacent fence. It's being undercut by coastal erosion, and at some point it'll become a safety problem as people and animals will be able to access the airfield. It's being positioned to avoid navigational aids and rare plant locations. Next slide. Also proposed is new crew quarters. There's a shortage of housing for airport staff, which makes it difficult to hire and retain staff, especially for positions with critical emergency and safety duties. Proposed are two unit buildings, 2 duplexes on Nobadeer Farm Road. Would be on town water and sewer, and it would impact about 1 acre of priority habitat. Also proposed is a new ground service equipment building. There's currently inadequate storage space for ground service equipment. This is the kind of equipment needed for airport ground operations to move luggage around, deplane passengers, or tow airplanes. New storage building is proposed adjacent to Monahans Road. Next. And finally, expanding the marine storage facility. The airport proposes to lease out about 1 acre of land for commercial use, most likely for expanding a boatyard north of the existing boatyard between the ball fields and the airport fence. Would impact about 1 acre of priority habitat. Next. To summarize the environmental impacts of the projects, there would be about 14 acres of temporary and 9.5 acres of permanent impact to priority habitat of rare species, including some direct impact to rare plants. The airport has been discussing mitigation measures with the Natural Heritage Program. There'd be about 10 acres of net new impervious surface added with the projects. The key issue here is stormwater management to protect the sole source aquifer. And we're proposing swales, catch basins and infiltration systems to handle and treat the runoff. And we think it would improve treatment overall on the airfield. There's no noise impact as it's defined by FAA regulations. And there will be more efficient operations and an overall reduction in noise from the projects, but noise sources will be moved around somewhat with the South Apron expansion. And noise will increase in some areas. That's why the Airport Commission is considering the noise berm and other mitigation measures. There'd be additional lighting on the expanded South Apron and possibly elsewhere. And the airport has a draft lighting policy which should help minimize lighting impacts outside the airport. No air quality impacts are expected, and more efficient operations should, if anything, improve overall air quality. Temporary construction impacts such as dust, noise, and stormwater runoff would be managed with a variety of best management practices. And it's possible PFAS would be encountered in soil or groundwater in the project areas. The airport will continue to test for PFAS and to comply with all of the rapidly evolving state and federal guidelines and regulations regarding PFAS. And now I will turn it back to Dan to field your comments and questions.
Thank you, Jed, for that very complete summary of the programs that we have underway. And some of them I would again reiterate that some of them are related to safety improvements on the runways and the taxiways and the South Apron. And those are basically required. And some of those that are listed here, such as the crew quarters and the storage facility, will be undertaken by private parties. Not the crew quarters, I'm sorry, the marine storage and there's another one, I think. But anyway, that will be undertaken by a private party. The crew quarters is a airport project depending entirely on funding, since we will be paying for that ourselves or financing it ourselves. So a lot of these are going to get further discussion by the commission in terms of commitment. But some of them are some things we really have to go forward with. So again, thank you, Jed, and all of you for your comments. We're ready to start receiving comments and questions from the audience. We will record the comments and respond to them in preparing the final environmental document as been already outlined. You can also comment by sending an email to Alex Strisky at the address shown here on the slide, or submit additional questions to Noah Carberg, the Assistant Airport Manager. Thank you, and we will turn now to the question and answer comment phase. I should remind you that you need to refresh your browser to ensure that you are engaged in the comment process. All right, could you take that slide down? We can put it up again later, but for now I need to see the, Georgie, could you take this slide? Thank you. All right, I'm sorry, this doesn't look like the one I've used before, so I need some help on identifying the
Mark, do you mind facilitating who has raised their hand and then allowing them to talk?
Sure. So who would you like to go first?
whoever signed in first. Do I have that on my, I should have that on my screen, right?
Allowing Tom, the attendee, to speak.
I beg your pardon?
Tom Sidlowski?
All right, excuse me, just a second, Tom.
Yep.
Shouldn't I have on my screen the list of people who are waiting to talk?
Yeah, you should, under attendees.
Under attendees, gotcha. Okay, got it. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay,
please.
this is Tom Sidlowski. I'm the president of the Surfside Association. We have a membership of approximately 150 families with homes to the west of the airport. Obviously, we're not real excited about the South Apron expansion, and we think it will affect us in some of the ways we feel have not been adequately addressed in the environmental impact report. So I'll address that mainly. We're affected by the airport in the following ways. First and foremost, noise and odor. There are two types of noise and odor issues that should be addressed. noise and odor from planes that are parked, but running their engines to use their AC. The expanded apron will increase this. We're concerned that the noise berm is not included in this project, but is a quote possible enhancement. I understand there's a funding issue, but it clearly, to us, having 7.5 acres of hardscape put in on the habitat, and then saying that we have a problem with maybe affecting natural habitat to create a berm, which will later overgrow. It's a little hard to understand. We don't see any plans either for ground power units or mobile units to provide power to parked airplane. We think that should be considered because our neighbors constantly have a lot of odor and noise. Also, we don't know if it's the case, but we recommend that planes should always be parked with their noses to the west, so fumes would go toward the airport and be removed by the prevailing southwest winds. Another thing, just for a moment, let me get on my soapbox. You've heard it before, but noise is affected by the airport practice of sending slower planes over the houses in Surfside during busy times. We're constantly told that this is the FAA's doing, but we don't see any efforts by the airport to take action. We're also affected by water runoff. Monahans now floods by the back gate, by the current apron, often when there is rain. The South Apron comprises over 70% of the new paved area for all the projects. We'd like to see more specific plans for the airport to keep this water from invading the neighbors, and especially if you don't put the berm up. We're very concerned because the South Apron is very, very close to the neighbors. I'm glad to hear that lighting is going to be addressed. Light pollution has been a problem in the neighbors, and we hope you will do this. I do want to say it was a good presentation. I really appreciate that. We will put our comments into writing as requested by the state, but we hope that the environmental report does address noise and fumes that the South Apron will bring to our neighborhood. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate them. And I just want to say one thing about the berm and the fact that it is not, so to speak, a done deal. When it was first discussed back during the formulation of the master plan, I was concerned, and I still am concerned about the overall financial health of the airport. Before COVID hit, we had a couple of pretty decent years. The bottom fell out with COVID, and we've been fortunate to get some relief from the federal government for that. But the other major factor at play here is the PFAS issue, which you can appreciate. And we still have no idea, or we know approximately what all the remediation effort we've done to date and what has cost and what the short-term future holds, both in terms of other remediation and the building of the water main in round numbers. What we don't know are and we're just at the very beginning of understanding the impact on soil. And the state, as I think you may know, has not yet provided any standards, nor has the federal government. So I'm sure they're coming, and we have no idea what it's going to cost us. Most of the cost of remediation is going to have to be borrowed. So I just at this, as much as I would like to, I think this is probably of our, if you will, discretionary projects. This is as important as any. But at this point, I, for one, and other commissioners, at least at our discussion last month, agreed with the idea that we can't at this point make the financial commitment. Hopefully we'll see our way to doing that. But we're talking, depending on how much mitigation is involved, we're talking about between 700,000 and $1.1 million for the berm. And as these projects get pushed out, the costs go up, as you know. So that's where we are on it. I know it's not a message you want to hear, and your constituents want to hear, Tom, but that's where we are at the moment. But we are extremely sympathetic to the issue, and we'll do whatever we can to try to do it. All right, the next hand up is Meredith Lepre.
Hi, I live near the airport, and I have several concerns about these projects. One, this seems like a really big project when you really haven't finished up the PFAS and stuff. And really, it was the airport that poisoned many of the local wells. I also am wondering why you weren't putting more parking for airplanes on the opposite side of the airport. I'm sure that it's inconvenient, but there are no homes over there, and you're really affecting all of your neighbors even more than you already have with the PFAS. I don't know if anyone on the commission or at the airport was affected by it, but it was a real issue. And I'm still really upset that I feel it has not been completely remediated. You're giving water to the housing that you have, but you're not giving water to the people who were affected by PFAS, which I am really upset about. I don't think anyone really polices the noise interruption that is going on at night. So if you're going to put housing and have people living there, I'd like to know that you're going to have someone policing the noise of the private planes. Because I think with the new noise pollution and new light pollution, you're really causing more issues for your neighbors, and you've already caused a lot of issues for your neighbors with the PFAS. So I think that you really need to think about doing something more positive. And it sounds like the berm is not going to happen, which means that it's just going to be louder at our homes. So I don't think this is a great plan. I think you should work on doing more stuff on the west side of, or on the east side of the airport, and use that space where you're not affecting your neighbors.
Thank you very much for your comments. I don't see any other hands up. So we will close the comment period and move forward. Again, I would remind you, maybe we can put the slide up on the screen again of Alex Strisky's email and contact information for comments, just for a moment. And then we will close this portion of the meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
will it be will it be a section for commissioner comments?
I'm sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right, Mr. Gasparo. My apologies. Go ahead.
So if I may, just in response to some of the public comments, as well as I'm a member of the environmental subcommittee along with Mr. Buscarin, and we have been discussing these projects and working on the draft EAIR with the consultants. And I think it is important that we realize there are a lot of projects that we've gone over, and there is a focus on seemingly, mostly to the South Apron. I think that there is a lot of, these projects were developed out of the longer range capital planning process, and that it is important that a lot of them go forward. Specific to the South Apron, I think it is important to note that the commission is not unanimous in its feeling with respect to the funding of the berm, and I'm essentially representing a minority opinion. And that, I do believe that that the funding and the berm needs to be a condition of the approval of the projects. So that's just to, I understand that I am in the minority, but I think that is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have a comment? Ms. Topham?
No,
Mr. Buscarin, are you on yet?
Yeah, I've been on for about 20 minutes. No
Good,
comment.
welcome. Do you have any comments?
I do not, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Planzer did not make it, I gather. All right, the only other thing I would point out is that the runway and taxiway projects and all the little pieces of those, the fillets and the high-speed taxiway and so forth are all, as well as the South Apron, are all things that the FAA has fairly high on its priority list for us to accomplish for safety reasons, essentially. And the concerns that have been caused by the overcrowding on big weekends are significant. And they have actually pressured us to move the South Apron project up the ladder of priorities. So thank you. Mr. Rafter, do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, I think you just hit it, Dan. That was a focus of our last capital improvement plan meeting with FAA, that we moved that project up as a priority project. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll close this portion of the meeting. Those of you who aren't on the agenda later on from the state and the FAA and VHB and also from McFarland Johnson, if any of you aren't needed later on, you're gladly excused with our great thanks for your participation and contribution to this meeting.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank
Good night.
you. Good night.
thank you.
Bye.
All right, moving on with our regular agenda.
Okay, I'm gonna log off. So Katie, you are now the host and should all be set.
So actually, this is still the public meeting, Mark.
Okay.
That was our first part of the meeting, and now we're still in the public meeting. So
Okay, no problem.
sorry about that.
Are there any comments on the remainder of the agenda?
No,
Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. Are there any comments or additions or corrections to the minutes of the November 20th, 2020 meeting, which was our PFAS-related public meeting? Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
I was abstaining because I wasn't at that meeting, I don't believe.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. And then for the December 8th regular meeting minutes, are there any additions or corrections?
No,
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll
So-
make that motion.
Is there a second? Who seconded?
I did.
Mr. Gasparo, thank you. Mrs. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye,
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? And I vote aye. Is there a motion to ratify the warrants of December 16th and December 16th, 2020 and January 6th, 2021?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye,
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Mr. Rafter, would you like to go through the pending leases and contracts?
Yes, sure. The first is a lease amendment with the Nantucket Regal Group, which is the Crosswinds Restaurant, and that is for consideration due to the pandemic of an abatement of 50% of the rent. Next is a catering license agreement with Taste of Nantucket. That's a standard $1,500 business fee. The next three have been on there for a while. Well, Southern Airways, we're still working with them to try to get the agreement squared away. Retrix has informed us late today that they will not be renting any storage area from us or taking the equipment off airport. Airport Gas, we're still waiting a response from them to see if they're going to be doing a sublease. So those three are pending. The next for the L3 Harris Technologies is a contract for $49,500. It's a 3-year agreement, and that is for the public view flight tracking. That's the public-facing flights that you see. Next is a contract with Infax for $37,680. Again, another 3-year agreement, and that is for a support and service of the FID system. Then we have a contract with Passer Aerospace for $79,200, another flight tracking software, 3-year agreement, but that is the one that is used internally and provides us a higher level of data that's required for operational purposes. And then we have a contract with Water Filtration in New England, doing business as Culligan, adding $2,221 to the original contract, bringing it up to $57,521.33, and that was the original poet contract for some additional work that was related to unknown site conditions. And the remainder have been on here and are just kept on there in pending status, so that you'll see that they'll be coming up in the near future.
Any questions or comments from the commission? Is there a motion to approve the contracts which Mr. Rafter cited?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. All right, moving on to the pending matters of the capital approval process, home rule petition, Mr. Rafter.
There's nothing new to report there other than NOAA has established a routine communication dialogue with our representatives and is keeping in touch with them. And the next item is the PFAS update, which if the chairman would permit, I'd like to turn it over to NOAA for his update.
That's fine. Go ahead, Mr. Carberg, please.
Thank you, Dan. There's an activity table update in your packet on page 99. This table shows the activity for December, which really reflects samples that were taken in November. The major actions are that 3 additional access agreements were executed and sample results were received for Matagasham Valley Road, Monahans and Nobadeer Way areas in early December. In the table under Matagasham Valley Road, this period activity, those results all reflect not new samples, but existing POET influence quarterly samples. You should see that there are 6 instances of greater than 200 parts per trillion. Again, that's influence samples of existing POETs. For the Monahans area, 4 results were received. There was a non-detect for POET effluent. 2 of the results were new and they were for samples testing under 20 parts per trillion, and 1 sample with a detection of between 20 and 200 parts per trillion. For Nobadeer Way, 2 new samples were received under 20 parts per trillion and 1 between 20 and 200 parts per trillion. We've winterized 3 POETs with 4 homes closed now for the season. For the IRA status update report number 8, these are our monthly IRA intermediate response action reports required to the Department of Environmental Protection. We received and reviewed the December status report, and our consultant has updated it to Mass DEP. We've also published it on our website. Tom, if you could screen share the updated potentiometric figure, it's with the groundwater contours.
Okay. Give me 1 second here. I believe this is the one that you're looking for. Is that shared yet or?
No.
No. Okay, give me a second.
Well, Tom sharing it, I'll also call it out. This is in the RA status update, which is available on our website.
For some
So
reason,
there is another way to get to it.
can you see that now?
It's coming. It's, yeah,
Yep.
now we can.
Good. Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
So this figure has been updated with some survey well elevation data that was obtained, and we located and our consultant rehabilitated 4 old wells to get them into shape for sampling, and the data reflects the inclusion of those wells. So again, this represents a total of, I believe, 9 wells now to inform the groundwater flow contours with no major change from the information that's available to us. It still shows groundwater flow direction nominally to the south. We also received new, and Tom, you can, at your preference, you can leave this up for the next few points. We received new data last week. It's a large and complicated soils data set with some data from the additional monitoring wells. We had initial data review with the consultant on Wednesday, and they are preparing more context for us. This data will be presented at the end of January in the January IRIS status report update. But before that update, we will release the data in advance of that publication via our PFAS website, under the same procedures that we do now with our data and reports. But the main elements that the commission and the public should expect to see are that there is a range of soil impacts across our historical AFFF release sites. We will have the results of a leasehold investigation, and we will have the results of additional monitoring wells on airport property that were rehabilitated and sampled. For an update on water service, this is the project to bring water service into homes west of the airport where water is available at the curb, but those homes are not connected to municipal water. The airport and our consultant held a meeting on 12/29 with 7 affected residents. Only 1 resident was able to attend, but several more subsequently viewed the recording, and this recording is available through our PFAS website. In this meeting, we reviewed the next steps and procedures for connections. And then the next expected outcome is to schedule and walk through site visits with each resident, draw up specific site actions, review the characteristics that are going to be unique to each lot. And I believe at this time we have 2 of those site visits scheduled, and we will schedule the rest. For the water main project.
Excuse me, Noah, who participates in those site visits?
At this point, it will be Mr. Lasden from McFarland Johnson, myself, and possibly Kevin McMahon from MJ, who is also the on-site engineer for the security project with the homeowner.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, for the water main, Tom, I believe I have a
Yeah.
screen share for this figure as well.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So we've had a series of discussions with Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, rare species permitting staff. The original project as we proposed it was a trench and fill. It's just like it sounds. You dig a hole, lay the pipe, push the dirt back over the top of it. However, the division indicated that they would require rare species surveys in the red areas. You'll see 3 red areas on this figure across the runway 6 approach, sort of in 3/4 of the way down the end of Matacasham Valley Road, and then roughly southeast of the ASR 9. Accommodating these surveys would delay the project by up to a year to accommodate the survey windows for the suite of rare plants. They're both late spring and early fall flowering plants. And again, these were issues across the Runway 6 approach where we had to leave the traveled way because the traveled way was conveyed to a homeowner, and to avoid Nantucket Island Land Bank property, as I believe they would not be able to issue an easement. So we discussed if we could stage this extension into 2 phases, one that would be under the road west of the airport along Monahans, and the other across the Runway 6 approach and Matacashan Valley Road. We were advised we could not due to project segmentation issues. We believe it's a fair assumption that the results of these surveys, if we elected them, would only go so far as to confirm that these rare plants are there, and then that the best mitigation would be to directional drill in these areas. So rather than wait a year for what we think is an inevitable conclusion, we are proposing directional drilling at the areas indicated in red. This will allow us to assume the outcome, plan for it now, and expedite the project. And through our consultant, we've submitted this filing to the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife to reflect the directional drilling components. And while we have early indications that they will be able to permit this with only temporary impacts and no construction season requirements, we look forward to hearing that in writing. And once we receive that determination, our consulting engineer in the airport can then move through into the design and bid document phase, and that will inform a much more firm project delivery schedule. Regarding POET systems, apologize, I just need to switch my screen. We believe that we are not only completed with the identification of step-out sampling, but we have 5 pending POET systems for installation. And these remaining POET systems are tentatively scheduled for installation the last week of this month. Again, I don't want to commit to the last week of this month. There's always, the contractor does come from off island. Sometimes parts don't arrive at time, but there are a couple homes that we are still monitoring that are in the sort of 18 to 19 parts per trillion range. If they do exceed 20 with the sampling, we will move to install POETs in those homes. But we're hopeful that we've identified the extent of the contamination and the extent of the POET systems. And that will conclude my PFAS report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Noah on this topic?
No.
All right. Thank you, Noah. Keep plugging away. Finance. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Airport lighting policy is the next issue.
Yes, in your packet, Commissioners, is a draft lighting policy that we would request your consideration this evening to adopt. It has been coordinated with the town. It references town bylaw in there, and we have coordinated with the lighting enforcement officer and the process by which we will run the projects by them. They essentially, most of our projects are excluded but we will coordinate with the lighting enforcement officer on all of our lighting projects. So we request your approval of that policy.
Any comments or questions on the lighting policy?
No.
Is there a motion to approve the policy as submitted?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gasparo. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Carries and is enacted. Declaration of surplus property for 14 Airport Road.
Yes, this is the declaration that's required for the concession space within the tent. We're going to be putting that RFP out again, and it's just a requirement that we declare the surplus property in that area. I don't Katie, do we need any action from the commission on this or approving it? You're muted, Katie.
Yes, they would need to vote on that.
I'm sorry.
The declaration, they would need to vote on that.
Mr. Gasparo?
Make a motion to declare the area as surplus property.
Second.
Thank you. How do you vote? Any other comments? How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? And I vote aye. All right. On to finance matters. Consideration of taxi fees.
Yeah, we're a little alphabetically out of order here, but so I would like to request the commission allow us to give some consideration to the taxi cab permit fees for this year. They are due in this month. Currently, they've been primarily associated with the pandemic. They've seen a significant drop, as we have with the employments. Currently, the taxi cab fee is $400. I would like to recommend that we charge $200 for this season, and currently there's about 30 operators. So the time period is from January to December, and it would be a 50% reduction just for this this year, 2021 season.
Questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve the airport manager's recommendation to reduce the taxi charge for basically the 2021 season from $400 to $200 on this is a temporary reduction?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. All right, December fuel sales.
Yes, just because of the pandemic and its impacts, I just thought it'd be appropriate to update the commission on the status of fuel, because that is our primary generator right now of the revenue. For December, our fuel sales were down 42%, or $146,656. Jet gallons sold were down 36%. Avgas gallons were down 38%. And the year-to-date total fuel sales were down 17%, or $1.4 million. Now, that's a lot of money, but at the same time, we have some of that offset by not having to buy the fuel. However, it does have an impact on our net bottom line. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. On a little bit better note, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 was passed, and it's estimated that we may receive up to $1.4 million in funding. And the wording in the act states it is for costs related to operations, personnel, cleaning, sanitization, janitorial services, combating the spread of pathogens at the airport, and debt service payments. And it's also estimated that we may be in line for about $28,000 for concession relief. So that's some good news, and we're going to be working directly with the consultants on that as well. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, one other item under finance that the FY22 budget, we were initially on the agenda for tomorrow night to present to the select board, but I believe that may be pushed back another week or so.
All right, thank you. Any questions on the finance issues?
No.
The manager's report, which you've already done a lot of.
Some of that, yes. On the project update, Taxiway Echo, you may have heard we had an aircraft incident involving the closed portion of Taxiway Echo. Aircraft landed on Taxiway Echo, struck the barricades and a sign, pulled up, and then went around and landed safely on runway 24. So that was good that everything was safe. We will be meeting this week with the design team to review the phasing and scheduling for the remainder of the project. The security phase 2 work continues primarily in the terminal FBO and ARF buildings, running conduit and pulling wire. And it's anticipated that next month we'll be seeing some trenching taking place. The fuel farm rehabilitation, the Finance Committee has approved a supplemental funding for funding request for this project. And we have an updated schedule that indicates plans will be available March 10th. Bid openings for the filed subbidders will be April 12th, and bid opening for the general contractors will be May 3rd. And that is in coordination with the scheduled town meeting on June 5th. Again, assuming the appropriation is approved, then we would proceed forward and issue a notice to proceed in October. And then construction, looking at between October and December, the end of this year. So that's the updated schedule for the fuel farm. Other RFP and bids, we have what's known as Bunker Road number 32. The deadline for that has been extended to Friday, January 29th. That's a property that is located behind the electric company. We we're reissuing bids for our aircraft tug, and they're due in January 29th. We're working on development of an RFP for a maintenance system for the new security items that are being installed, and the HVAC invitation for bids is being developed, and we have 90% of that complete. The operational update, we've received some initial information regarding summer flights for the airlines. Currently, it looks like JetBlue at their peak will be at 10 flights a day, American at 5 flights a day, and that will include Philadelphia and Charlotte. And it appears that United will be bringing back Newark service with 3 flights a day. 3 flights a day. Also, on the maintenance side of the house, the staff has begun developing a scheduled maintenance plan for stormwater features following the receipt of the Jacobs inventory. And this month they'll begin with routine inspections of the landside structures, and then more robust inspections for the structures where works were previously noted. Another item, and I'd like to thank NOAA and Chief Murphy for this. They have coordinated the vaccines for our emergency response personnel, and they will begin tomorrow receiving some of the vaccines. We have 4 individuals scheduled for tomorrow, so thank you very much for that effort, NOAA. Any questions before I move on to statistics?
Go ahead.
And to try to be as brief as possible, I've only included November. You may recall last month we didn't have them, but they're in your packet for October. So I'll go ahead with November's. The operations are down 22.3% over last November, down about 30% year to date. Southwest Ramp GA operations for November were up 87%. Again, the interesting impact of the pandemic. Employments are down 23% over last November, and year to date about 60%. Cape Air has now combined their statistics with Nantucket Air and saw a 32% decrease in employments. Tradewinds was up 163% or 156 passengers. The Boston market, Cape Air had a 53% decrease. New Bedford, Southern entered this market, and the overall traffic was down 40%. The Hyannis market for November, Cape Air and Nantucket combined was down 8% or 53 passengers. Southern added 10, so overall Hyannis is down 6% or 43 passengers. JFK, very interesting this year. JetBlue stayed in the market, as you know, stayed to the end of the year. And they had a significant impact. JetBlue carried 321 passengers. Cape Air was down 45 passengers. Overall, the market was up 276 passengers. Again, because of the JetBlue impact. Vineyard traffic was up significantly, 100 passengers, which equates to about 714%. And I don't know, but I think it may have had something to do with the timing of the flights. I want to look into that. Norwood had 20 passengers. Providence Southern carried 39 passengers. Jet A gallons for November up 60%, year to date down 6.4. December, as I mentioned earlier, was up about 36% or 14,549 gallons. Avgas for November down 20%, year to date down 18.5. December, they were down 38%. Freight for November was up significantly, 61.89% over last November, and year-to-date is up almost 15%. And noise complaints were down from 2 last year to 0 this year. Any questions on statistics before I move on to personnel?
No.
Go ahead.
Okay, on the personnel side of the house, we had one administrative staff member test positive for COVID recently, and one FBO employee who was in contact with someone that tested positive. In coordination with town HR department and others, our staff members, we've taken all appropriate actions and are limiting the in-person staffing of the administration to 1 person per floor per day for this week. So Noah and I are taking turns on the second floor, and Linda and Deb will be taking turns on the first floor. We've taken all the, again, actions necessary. We have the equipment, did all the cleaning. We'll be cleaning and sanitizing the FBO again tonight. We've done the notifications, and so a number of folks have tested, and everyone else has tested negative so far in the building. That's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rafter on his report?
No.
All right. I would advise the public, if there is a public still with us, if you want to make a comment, to raise your hand and refresh your browser, and we'll get to you in just a moment. Are there any commissioners' comments?
No.
Arthur, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, sorry, I planned the mute thing. I had one back to just the manager's report briefly related to the stormwater. There were some stormwater basins that were not found as part of the Jacobs investigation. And I was just hoping that there would be follow-up, that we would be trying to find those, because they are located down in that area that the resident brought up related to the flooding on Montahanset. And so I just don't want that to, I just wanted it to be on your radar. I'm hoping that we can try to, hopefully find those and maybe, bring those back to life if possible. Thank you.
And I see Noah shaking his head. I know he's been coordinating directly on that project, so we will search for those and make sure we look into that. Thank you.
I sent all of you, the commissioners, a proposed response to an email that I and several others received this morning from Peter McKay, who is a resident, I think, is it Montahanset or is it somewhere? Montahanset. Basically complaining about the speed with which the water line was being extended, and representing a number of residents in that area. I have written that draft response to him. I don't purport to represent the commission per se, but I think I would hope that if you don't have any problems with it, you would all agree to my sending it. Have you had a chance to read it?
I haven't.
No.
And Tony, you probably haven't either.
I saw it briefly when I was checking in an hour ago, but I didn't read it.
Yeah.
We could flip. Could we take a look at it and then come right back on, or?
No, why don't we do this? Why don't you take a look at it and let Noah know if you have any problems with it in the morning.
That's fine. I'll do that.
Because it can wait until tomorrow to go out. I was just hoping that I could get a blessing for it, but obviously, if you haven't had a chance to read it, which is understandable, that's not going to happen. So,
will do.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Let me see here. I don't see any hands up in the attendee group, so I will declare public comment closed. And I will ask for a motion, please, to, for the commission to go into executive session under general law, chapter 30A, section 21A, not to return to public session, to review executive session minutes of the dates enumerated for possible release, and to review the minutes of December 8th, 2020 for review and possible release. B, under clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. And C, under clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
We are going into executive session. Thank you, Brian and Georgie, for sticking with us.
Thank you very
You're
much,
welcome.
Georgie.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You too.
everybody.
And Mark, this is when you can switch and make me the host if you don't mind.
Sure, you're already the host, so I'm
Okay.
going to exit.
Awesome. And where are we off of YouTube?
Yep, I'll disengage that right now. End stream, done.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Yep, have a